Hi, my name is Sangeeta Kumar, and I'm the CEO and founder of Be the Change Consulting. Join me in Liberated AF, the workplace revolution. This is a podcast where we get to explore what does it take to become the organization that we want to work for. So what is that? The organization I want to work for, it supports my humanity and makes me feel like I belong. It's a place that isn't racist, it isn't extractive. It works for the boomers and the Gen Alphas. There's space for everyone to bring their genius to work. Don't we want to become that? And don't we want to create that? So I have been studying organizational dynamics for over 20 years, and I love working with teams stuck in an entrenched challenge to bring clarity to diverse perspectives and look for ways that human-centered systems. We're going to tell stories, we're going to answer questions, we're going to offer strategies on this podcast. Together, we are going to become something new. Let's go.
Sangeeta, how was your training week this week?
Bong, I had a doozy just yesterday. It's like fresh in my mind. I was with a group of clients, well, one group, and I introduced the session in a really kind of different way just to see what would happen. So I was kind of testing something. And I asked these participants.
Before you go, testing something, what was the objective of the session? So this was an equity session?
Yeah, it was a training called Trailblazing for Equity. Okay. And it's for people who are not like senior managers, not senior leaders, but kind of more middle leaders, middle managers, middle leadership. They might be supervisors, they might be kind of like team leads, and they're in a government department, a county department, and they're embarking on a pretty large equity initiative, which is really cool. And we're having a hard time like scaling the work, I guess. And so this training was is a way to bring more leadership in and empower them to feel equipped to champion the equity work that, the leadership is looking to roll out.
Okay, one more question. So when you were in there, I know as a facilitator, you feel the room, you feel the vibe. What was your gut telling you? Are these folks like, are they starting their journey in this work? Yeah. I see you nodding. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there were people that I knew. So I think it was a very traditional bell curve mix of like, maybe 30% of the room are like very avid, loud advocates for equity and racial equity in particular. And then my guess was, this is just totally my bias looking around at body language, at like, just the demographics, a lot of older white folks who have probably been in the system for many, many years. So like 20% that look like old guard. What do they think? I don't know. And actually a bunch of people surprised me that some assumption I made that they were not that on board with equity work, and they were like super in it. So just to say, like, I think there was like a 20% that looked like old guard, and I learned, in that, in my takeaway, like, don't make an assumption that the old guard can't be, down for this work. And then my guess was there was like that group in the middle that was like, it may be interested, maybe down for allyship, but don't really know what is being asked of them.
Yeah, so you're totally right. That's a complete nice mix of that. So you decided after you were assessing the group that I'm going to try something new today. What'd you do?
Yeah, so I was there to talk about specifically racial equity, and I looked around the room and there were I think like one Black person and like maybe 5 Latinx folks, people of color. And, again, those are my assumptions, right? I'm just tracking the room and trying to see what I see. And I got nervous about introducing race right away. So my first exercise was going to start to talk about racial inclusion and what, the complexities of what's happening in this system to people of color. And we have a bunch of data that's showing, disproportionate experiences in engagement and comfort and a sense of belonging. So we were going to start with looking at the data, and I got nervous. And so I was like, And sometimes this just happens where I'm like, oh, something, I think we can have a different starting place. So on the fly, I tried a new thing. And so what I did was I introduced myself. I said, my name is Sangeeta Kumar. I use she, her pronouns. I had my name on my whiteboard. I wrote she, her. And I phonetically spelled my name. And then I was like, yeah, I'm sharing just a little bit about my identities and how you say my name because I think it matters in this conversation. And so I'm just going to invite you all to do the same thing. They had little name cards on their tables, like a table name tent, and they had written their name on it. I was like, why don't you add your gender pronouns onto your name tag and introduce yourselves at your table first? And then just talk about like what comes up for you when I introduce myself with gender pronouns and when I'm asking you to do the same. And so they did that. And then, what I'm doing, it just took it like, so I walked into the room, I did my little assessment, I kind of made this pivot. So while they're talking, I got to just kind of ear hustle a little bit, which helps me kind of get a sense of like, who are these people and where are they? What's the level of engagement? What's the level of comfort? So what I saw is everybody was talking, people started with like, what department are you with? Or, how long have you worked here? So they didn't just jump right in. So that was good. They warmed themselves up at the table. And then we brought folks back together. And so I said, yeah, how was that for you all? And I was like, and then nobody said anything because it was a vague question. And so then I asked, why do you think we ask for gender pronouns? Why do you think I did that in this training? And someone was like, well, it models inclusivity. It sends a message that we understand that there's a gender binary and or that we live in a gender binary and there's actually a gender spectrum. It's a symbol. It's an invitation. Like maybe we won't get it all right, but we are open to the conversation. So good things. Right? A couple people, had good things to say. And then I asked, well, who might react to this invitation? Who might not feel good about it? And I asked that because I thought there were people in the room who didn't feel good about it.
Yeah.
And I think it was a risky move because it was so early in the training. But I don't know, something told me to just do it. So I asked that and someone said maybe they feel uncomfortable. Someone might feel uncomfortable. I was like, well, what do you think the discomfort is? Well, maybe it's unfamiliar. And then one person in the room said, I actually didn't feel good about it. I felt put on the spot. I felt like, why am I being forced to share my gender identity? So I didn't feel good and I actually didn't want to do it. And she had she did it, but she wrote it in pen. Everyone else wrote their names and their gender pronouns in Sharpie. And so I was like, okay, so it was like, she did it, but it was like a little passive aggressive.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. So thank you for bringing in the disagreement and kind of sharing your truth. And I imagine that might not feel totally comfortable to you. And she was like, yeah, it's really scary to say that in this room. And I was like, well, okay, great. Thank you. So we're bringing in multiple perspectives. So in the conversation of inclusion, what we're practicing right here is visibilizing some of the different perspectives that are in the room. So thank you for that. And I could feel, how you feel in the room, like the temperature went up and people's like, if it was a TV show, like you could see people's pupils dilating, people were leaning in. And it didn't feel comfortable, right? It wasn't like a breezy, oh, we're in this interesting conflict. It was like, uh-oh, this is about to go south. That's what it felt like. And I was like, okay, so that's another perspective. And I was like, oh, just moving along. So that's another perspective of why someone might not be into it. What's another one? And then someone said, well, maybe someone might actually have hatred or, bias or prejudice towards folks who, both people who identify, non-binary, as well as people who are trying to make space for it. Like, so, okay. So just there, I was like, I don't know what's coming up for you just hearing all that.
Well, I was thinking as a facilitator, the first thing that really struck me was when you said you got nervous. Like you were going in and you were doing a session trailblazing for equity. And after assessing the room, when you got nervous. So if you're nervous, they're scared. So I thought that was the first interesting thing, right? Which is interesting too, because the session was called Trailblazing for Equity. And so it means you have to do the work. So I thought that was interesting. And I thought it was interesting because as an equity facilitators, we got these like moves, right? You got to set some agreements around like how we're going to set our gender pronouns, like what it's like, what it's going to be like, and you jumped right in. So I thought that was also interesting too, which makes me think again, like, one size doesn't fit all. And then, for that one participant who wrote her gender pronoun in pen, the fact that she said something and shared that she was scared, I found it to be very courageous. Because in that moment, she was standing with you, in front of you and all these folks, right? And then you had mentioned like folks knew that it was beginning to feel like it was going south and it wasn't breezy. It wasn't ever gonna be breezy if you're trailblazing for equity. So I think that's what's coming up for me is like they wanted this session and you brought them to the realness of this session. And so oftentimes people are like, okay, now what? How are you gonna save us? And what I heard from you is like, I'm not saving you. We're going to ride through this together because it's not about saving, because I know how to do this. You all don't know how to do this yet. So let's just stay here with me for a moment. So that's what came up for me.
Ooh, that's good. I agree with everything you're saying, except for I know how to do this. In that moment, I was like, do I know how to do this?
Well, no, I mean, like, okay, but
You're right. We crested the choppy waters, so we stayed in it.
No, but that's the thing is, you know how to do it. And you don't know how to do it too because you haven't met all the people in the world, Sangeeta. You haven't been in the room with all the different diversities and the stories. So as you were in there, I think that, which is the humility that you bring into these spaces is like, oh, here's another group of folks that I don't know yet. You made assumptions and you're like, how am I going to ride through this with them, right? Because you need different tools, right? It's ones that maybe that's in your toolkit that you usually go to works for some groups, but you needed new tools for this group.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so then we left that there. So I was attentive. I noticed that I really wanted to take care of this one person who I knew was like not feeling good and was feeling scared. And I also was like, I don't want to over coddle that perspective. Like I want to see you, and it's one perspective, and there's this other. Then my next question was, who needs this practice? Like, who do we harm if we don't do a practice like this? Like, who's at the center, right? Who's the recipient? And that's a question we ask a lot. Like, who should be centered in this moment? Because, my model is like in the world of equity, we want inclusion, but because we have systems and structures that have systematically and structurally excluded so many people, in order to get to inclusion, sometimes we're going to be in a forced choice that we don't have the practices or the resources to be totally inclusive for everybody. And so that was my question, right? Who needs this practice? Who's harmed if we don't do something like this? And then, people were like, oh, trans folks, gender nonconforming folks, people who are non-binary, people with children who are exploring, their own gender identity, people who might be exploring their gender identity late in their development, like late stage identity formation. So all that, right? And so we're like, okay, so I was like, so let's turn it back to the group. What's a way that I could have introduced? So I was like, I know as your facilitator today, I am offering something, thinking about who I want to center. This is an exercise. This is a practice, not to center the majority of the people in this room who are, when I look around at the gender identities you've chosen, the ones I would have assumed match the ones that you put on your paper. So this isn't a practice that's centering these people. This is a practice that's centering people that we want to create a sense of welcoming and belonging for who might not be here yet. So I gave it back to him. I was like, how could we introduce this practice in a way that is inclusive, but centers the needs of these, the folks who are most likely to be harmed? Okay, so then they talked amongst themselves. And I heard at that one table, this one woman who was like, that did not feel good to me. I want to cry. I want to leave. And I'll just say to her credit, she didn't leave. Didn't cry. And I was going to go over there. And then I was like, no, there's a bunch of white folks at that table. Let them do their work. Like, this is white labor. This is white work, white people's work. And they did a good job. I was just, I was ear hustling. They did a good job of like listening to her and sharing a different perspective. We get that it didn't feel safe to you. And it really resonated to me that she said, it's not actually a practice designed for me, like for my identity. So I heard them saying things like that. So when we came back together, I'm going to wrap this up, but when we came back together, we said, how could we introduce this in a different way? And someone suggested, what the facilitator could do is say, introduce themselves and their gender pronouns, and then say, if this is a practice that's comfortable to you, add your gender pronouns to your name tag. This is a value of inclusion, and if it's a practice that feels comfortable to you. I was like, okay, we could do that. And then someone said, I like that because it feels inclusive, but what I will say is, I think a non-binary person might see that non-compliance with adding a gender pronoun and think that you hate them. And then that woman was like, but I'm an ally. That's not why I'm doing it. And so I was like, if you choose in this moment to center your own comfort because you're not comfortable putting your gender pronoun on there, then you have to acknowledge that you are putting out a story of ambiguity. And some people the impact on some people is going to be that you are not an ally and that you are not a safe person to talk to about these kinds of conversations. And so if you're willing to hold that way of being perceived, then go for that practice. But if you have a problem with that and that's not the way you want to be perceived, then I think you need to rethink where you feel comfortable. And so we ended it there. I have more sessions with this person and I will coach her, further. I'm sure it's not the end of it. But what I was kind of reflecting on afterwards is like, there's a lot of labor that happens, for the folks who are often marginalized in these spaces. And what we are looking to do sometimes in these trainings is to shift where that labor falls. And so if you are someone in a body of privilege, walking through the world where things feel mostly comfortable to you, to add a practice to yourself that feels uncomfortable is actually the work of allyship, because you're redistributing the emotional labor. And I think we're moving towards that understanding in this group. And it happened in like 20 minutes, which was kind of cool.
Brilliant, my friend. I mean, what I really truly appreciate about this story is that you did the work with the group. You challenged the group to do the work, because it would have been easy for you to talk about the different pivots that you would have done as a facilitator. So as you were somatically feeling your nerves, because you're assessing their nerves, and I think that the person who you're going to continue to work with, whether you coach her or go into a session, she is shifted. She started building a muscle that felt foreign to her body. And now it's only going to get stronger as she engages in more conversation in spaces like this, trailblazing for equity.
Yeah. And she gave all of us a gift. I think the gift of like, you stay with the discomfort, you have honest conversations, you don't back off out of a need for politeness. And watching someone shift, as you say, is healing for all of us, because it creates a sense of possibility in this work that often feels so hopeless.
It's starting the workplace revolution. Good job.
Let's keep learning. Let's keep trying.
We hope this conversation provided helpful insight and inspired you to create a more inclusive and liberated workplace. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. Your support makes a huge difference in helping us reach more listeners like you. We love to hear your thoughts on today's topic. Connect with us on social media and drop a comment. You can find all the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.